Hello everybody, Master Mason Michael here. My voice is a little hoarse. I did a star party last night, that is astronomy with the public. I have large telescopes that I enjoy sharing with the public. But the music was loud and had to talk over it, so I'm left a little bit hoarse. But this morning I was reflecting on the two primary elements that we're exposed to when we enter the lodge in the second degree, which are the Jachin and Boaz pillars. And with everything in Masonry, I'm always considering it from three aspects. One is the exoteric, what it is we're taught in the lecture and in the degree about the different elements that we're exposed to. The other is the esoteric, that's the inner teaching that we have to learn on our own through our own research and our own contemplation of what these things mean. And for the most part refers to enlightenment or the realization of the true self. That is the real light that is referred to in Masonry, lux et veritas. And the other is, I suspect, that there are clues in Masonry to a lost technology that was used in the ancient world, and maybe not so ancient, to work megalithic stone. And we see Jachin and Boaz pillars at the front of many ancient structures all around the planet, not just in the Middle East. And I think that maybe they were somehow an element of lost power generation force or something related to energy or the working of stone. And of course Masonry very clearly draws our attention to the working of stone, although it never really speaks about it in the terms I suspect it might be hiding. So as I was thinking about the Jachin and Boaz pillars, I took to looking in my library, and it's always interesting to me that some of the most enduring and obvious elements of Masonry are often not mentioned much in our literature, which kind of makes me wonder a little bit, what are those things really hiding? So for example, I have this beautiful book by James Wasserman, The Temple of Solomon. Lots of good information in it. Maybe there are comments in it about the Jachin and Boaz pillars, but it's not in the index. I thought that was curious. And so then I always like to turn to Albert Pike, and so initially I've been missing my copy of A Bridge to Light for a month, and I found it this morning. I wasn't even looking for it. That's what happens, right? When you're not looking for something is when you find it. It was misfiled in my library. And I had previously searched my library for it multiple times, wondering where did I leave this book. Maybe my library is getting a little bit too big when I lose a book in it. But in any case, there's a brief mention of the Jachin and Boaz pillars, and they're not even specifically speaking about them. This is at the introduction to the 17th degree, Knight of the East and West. I'm not going to speak about the degree, but the Bridge to Light is by Rex Hutchins, and he is commenting on what Albert Pike says in Morals and Dogma about each of the Scottish Rite degrees. And so here he's talking about the jewel of this degree and its colors. And he says these two colors, if you must know, it's half gold and half silver or mother of pearl. These two colors are emblems of the sun and moon, themselves symbols of the Egyptian deities Osiris and Isis, who represent the generative and productive forces of nature, illustrated in Masonic symbolism by the columns Jachin and Boaz as the active and passive forces manifested in nature. Okay, that's interesting. Representing the active and passive forces in nature. You know, anytime there's duality, we know what that's referencing. It's the expression into the material space of the one thing that can only be intuited, can't be known by the thinking mind. And the one thing expresses as two, that is what you can know. Well, that's not exactly correctly stated, but language fails when talking about this. All we can do is dance around it. Oh, kind of like Robert Frost, I suppose, in The Secret. We dance around an arena, suppose, while the secret sits in the middle and knows. Here, I'm going to read a paragraph or two from Manly P. Hall, Secret Teachings of All Ages. I know all my watchers are familiar with this book. I just looked in most of my books, not most, a number of them, looking for references to Jachin and Boaz just to see what other authors had to say about it. And Manly P. Hall, of course, he had something to say about it. So here he's talking about the Ten Commandments. It's in the chapter called the Tablets of the Law. So here he talks about Mosaic tablets, and I think he's using the term Mosaic as if to reference Mosaic, if you will. Without doubt, the Mosaic tablets have their prototype in the stone pillars or obelisks placed on either side of the entrance to pagan temples. These columns may pertain to that remote time when men worshipped the Creator through a zodiacal sign of Gemini, the symbol of which is still the phallic pillars of the celestial twins. The Ten Commandments, writes Hargrave Jennings, are inscribed in 2 groups of 5 each in columnar form. The 5 to the right, looking from the altar, mean the law, and the 5 to the left mean the prophets. The right stone is masculine, the left stone is feminine. They correspond to the 2 disjoined pillars of stone or towers in the front of every cathedral and of every temple in the heathen times. That's interesting. The right tablet of the law further signifies Jachin, the white pillar of light. The left tablet Boaz, the shadowy pillar of darkness. These were the names of the 2 pillars cast from brass set up on the porch of King Solomon's temple. They were 18 cubits in height and beautifully ornamented with wreaths of chainwork, nets, and pomegranates. On the top of each pillar was a large bowl, now erroneously called a ball or globe. I think it's interesting, when I first memorized the second-degree lecture, the staircase lecture, I mismemorized that word as bowl and was later corrected that it is a ball or globe, and that is indeed how it is represented in Masonic lodges. Manly P. Hall continues on to say, one of the bowls probably containing fire and the other water. Probably, he's guessing. But, Manly P. Hall is pretty well educated on ancient mystery school traditions, and I rather suspect his guesses are pretty close to being right on. But again, we're talking here, if we're talking about fire and water, we're talking about exoteric. The celestial globe, originally the bowl of fire, surmounting the right-hand column Jachin, symbolized the divine man. The terrestrial globe, the bowl of water, surmounting the left-hand column Boaz, signified the earthly man. These 2 pillars respectively connote also the active and passive expressions of divine energy, the sun and the moon, sulfur and salt, good and bad, light and darkness. Between them is the door leading into the house of God, and standing thus at the gates of sanctuary, they are a reminder that Jehovah is both an androgynous and anthropomorphic deity. As 2 parallel columns, they denote the zodiacal signs of Cancer and Capricorn, which were formerly placed in the chamber of initiation to represent birth and death, the extremes of physical life. They accordingly signify the summer and the winter solstices. Solstices, say that 3 times fast. Now known to Freemasons under the comparatively modern appellation of the 2 Saints Johns. Next, I found a bit here in George Steinmetz's 1953, I believe, book, The Lost Word and Its Hidden Meaning. I like to look at our oldest authors to try to get the clearest original intention of the meaning of what it is we're looking at in Freemasonry. And remember that, I've got an open mind. I also wonder if that Masonry might be part of the forgetting mechanism that I believe was placed on the planet after a series of cataclysms, when a negative, maybe non-human intelligence caused man to fall from awareness of the immediate presence of God and believe instead in all the things that we're stuck to believing now, which largely involve pain and ignorance, and I mean ignorance in a spiritual sense. I don't believe that. I'm open to the idea that that may be the case, but rather I more believe that Masonry was created as a mechanism to hide truths from the previous age that were being caused to be forgotten. hid the truths in plain sight in the fabric of this organization called Freemasonry, and maybe hid these truths so well they're lost forever. But that's what really interests me about researching these topics in Masonry, is looking for clues to, if that's the case, what were these secrets about who we really are, where we came from, and a lost technology that was used to work megalithic stone. So in this chapter, The Secret Doctrine in the Second Degree, I read a few paragraphs. I thought this was interesting. It's talking about the second degree, the Fellowcraft degree. This is the psychical degree of Freemasonry. It follows the material degree of entered apprentice and depicts the self-conscious being evolved from his previous state of simple consciousness. Heretofore guided by instinct, he will now be guided by reason. It is the counterpart of the biblical allegory of Isaac, he who meditated. Like Isaac, the Fellowcraft must meditate upon the problems presented for his consideration in this degree. He must analyze, weigh, and interpret them for himself, and his final conclusions will have the all-determining effect upon his future success. It is in this degree that the intellectual foundation is laid for the understanding of the spiritual degree which is to follow. Upon the integrity of this foundation, upon his grasp of the symbolism and allegory here presented for his inspection, rests his spiritual superstructure. It is well enough to speak of blind faith, and is true that in a few rare instances some have attained to spiritual illumination by faith alone. Yet it must be remembered that this is the winding road, not the straight path to mastership. The Fellowcraft does not depend nor wait on evolution. He accepts the admonition of that ancient Mason, St. Paul, to prove all things, hold fast that which is good. We have every right to expect outcroppings of the secret doctrine in the second degree. In fact, to a far greater extent than in the first, nor shall we be disappointed. However, we must not expect these altrusions to be as direct or as pointed in their implications as in the third degree. We may expect and shall encounter speculation of a spiritual nature. We shall not, due to the very nature of the degree, be operating. I'm going to skip several very interesting paragraphs about the working tools, where he explains that they are not tools in this degree, they are instruments. Anyway, I'm going to skip all that. That's something for another topic. The place of meeting is changed. No longer the ground floor, symbolic of the material. The Fellowcraft meets in the middle chamber, that plane between the material and the spiritual, the psychical realm. Likewise, he operates on the level of self-consciousness, between simple consciousness from which he has evolved, and cosmic consciousness to which he aspires. On the way to the middle chamber, one must first pass between the two columns, immutably signifying, wherever encountered, free will and universal law. No one can approach the middle chamber except of his own free will and accord, and he cannot enter except in accordance with universal law. And finally, forgot to set my timer. Time allows here. The immutable Albert Pike. I'm not sure that was the right word to use to describe him. So I think it was interesting in one section here where he describes the Yud. That is the Hebrew letter characterized by the 14th degree in the Scottish Rite as being phallic. It is a curious shape. I never heard that reference before. It's the reversing the letters of the ineffable name and dividing it, it becomes bisexual as the word Yud-He or Yah is, and discloses the meaning of much of the obscure language of the Kabbalah, and is the highest of which the columns, Jachin and Boaz, are the symbol. And then I'll just read this. It is kind of interesting. In the image of deity, we are told, God created the man, male and female, created he them. And the writer, symbolizing the divine by the human, then tells us that the woman, at first contained in the man, was taken from his side. So Minerva, goddess of wisdom, was born, a woman and an armor of the brain of Jove. Isis was the sister before she was the wife of Osiris, and within Brahm, the source of all, the very God, without sex or name, was developed Maya, the mother of all that is. Now, in Eastern mysticism, Brahman refers to truth, the one thing that's going on, and Maya as illusion, which is the expression of the one thing into the observable space that we tend to identify with and think is what is real, but is actually not real. The Word is the first and only begotten of the Father, and the awe with which the highest mysteries were regarded has imposed silence in respect to the nature of the Holy Spirit. The Word is light and the life of humanity. It is for the adepts to understand the meaning of the symbols. And I think what he means by adepts is enlightened sages, those who have self-realized, to which all these things make obvious sense. And let's see, here's another section that I will skip. There's just so many little things to poke at with Masonry to try to figure out what the heck it's all about. I think the spiritual part of it is pretty obvious. The whole reason for approaching the East as the place of light is the attainment of recognition of the one thing, the light that illuminates all of the observable space. I think that's a pretty easy thing to learn to do, if you're told how, and pretty obvious to recognize if one's familiar with philosophical writing and teaching. The where we came from part, I think that's a little more obscure. And the lost technology part, well, evidence of it is super obvious. It's all over the realm. But trying to ferret out if Masonry holds any secrets about how megalithic stone was worked is a little tricky. I haven't found any direct information that, I'm not lifting megalithic stone blocks by some secret I have uncovered in all the literature I've read. I suspect that our ancient Masons knew how this was done. Was it lost on purpose as part of what I call the forgetting mechanism? Maybe. Was it encoded in Masonry so well, hidden so well, that it's lost forever? That's likely. Is there encoded information yet to be discovered in our most ancient, I should say our oldest Masonic texts? I think that's also very likely. Certainly, and we'll discuss this at some future point, but many of our early Masonic authors certainly were at a time when other famous authors, like Francis Bacon, a la Shakespeare, if you will, encoded secret information in their writings. And we have examples like Genesis, which I think employed a naturally occurring encoding of information that occurs in communication at a technological level. And that's something else to discuss later. But I just want to leave you with this final thought. If if we were just to accept for a minute what philosophers have told us over the ages, that there is a one thing that's going on. Kitty wants my attention. She's been napping this whole time. Her name is Sashi because she's white, so she's a moon. Come on up if you must. If there is one thing going on, and it permeates all aspects of everything that we observe, then there she is. Here, you want to say hi to the world? Hello. Then we ought to be able to recognize it in this moment right now, right in front of us, obvious. This one thing that's going on that never ceases is tricky to notice because there's never a non-doing it moment to compare the doing it moments to. And this one thing that I'm talking about is, of course, to speak in Christian Western-based terms, God's immediate presence. And by immediate, I mean right now, never ceasing. So if we were to look for this in our current experience, a way to do it would be to look for a similar aspect of how it feels. to all our methods of observation. So there is a way it feels to see, and a way it feels to hear. There is a way it feels to think. There's a way it feels to have emotion. There is a feeling in my body right now, sitting in this chair. It's different from the feeling I had standing on my feet a little bit ago. And it's different from the feeling I'll have in my body in just a little bit as I get up to turn off the camera. There is a sense of the things that I'm hearing. And those things I'm hearing are going to be different in a few minutes. But the sense of hearing is the same. So this sameness quality of all our observation is what it is philosophy is talking about. And we typically only pay attention to the differences, the changing aspects, and we identify with those. And we completely ignore the unchanging, constant aspect. So I'm aware of a taste in my mouth right now. It's different than the taste I'll be aware of in a while. I'm aware of pressure in my body right now, sitting in the chair. It's going to be different than the pressure I'll be aware of in my body when I'm on my feet in a little bit. I'm aware of thoughts in my head, and they're going to be different than the thoughts I'm going to be aware of in a little while. Oh, what's the common aspect? It's awareness. It's the sense of awareness itself. And the sense of awareness is something we all have equally. It is the one thing that's going on. Thank you everybody for watching. Please like, share, subscribe, and comment down below. It helps the Google algorithm, and hopefully the channel might grow and expose these interesting things I'm discovering about Freemasonry to other people that are interested in this stuff. Thanks again, everybody. Be back soon.